Hello, everyone. Brother Al McLean with this week's stewardship video. And before we go too far, here's the disclaimer. No advice should be seen as a recommendation or endorsement, as I am not a licensed financial advisor, and this is for educational purposes only. So you want to do your own research. If you have a financial advisor or registered investment counselor or advisor, that's what they're there for. Go to them, lean on them for advice. You ever been around someone and they mention something and you're like, that is a bad idea? And that's how I felt as they've been floating around this idea, and I think it started with President Trump on the 50-year mortgage. I can't tell you how uneasy that makes me feel to even the fact that this product is being considered. Right now, you get 30-year, 15-year, 20-year mortgages, but 50-year mortgage is talking about doubling down on debt. In fact, they've been doing some calculations on it, and you can see here from the headline that I pulled offline, it says maybe at the most you'll get $119 savings. I've heard upward of maybe $200 savings on your mortgage, and that, but the interest is just double. And that's what UBS, that's a bank, is estimating. So it's brought to mind with a resounding uh, alarm to me, Proverbs 22:7, which says, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. I mean, look at the strong verbiage that God uses in his word, that the borrower is slave to the lender. Now, we're not saying debt is a sin. We're not saying it. But if you look in the Bible, it doesn't name debt as a sin, but it uses strong words like curse. If you look in Deuteronomy, and or like Proverbs 22:7 here, slave to the lender. Or if you look in Romans, it says, "Oh no man, nothing except the debt, of love." Or if you go to Proverbs 6, and Dave Ramsey has made a whole teaching about Proverbs 6 about with gazelle intensity, get yourself out of debt. So when I hear things like a 50-year mortgage, I'm saying run to the hills on this. And so this got me to thinking about what's a debt situation today. And I get it. There's a lot of pain from people saying that they feel that because of the cost of housing, that they'll never be able to afford a house. But I will tell you, the 50-year mortgage is not the answer. Uh, and it got me to thinking about what's going on with the debt. And the Philadelphia Federal Reserve, put out some recent debt numbers about from January of this year. This is $920 billion of debt, credit card debt specifically, to now uh, it's on pace. It's now in November, and this slid a little bit. The debt amount is looking at around 980, over 980 billion with a B in current credit card debt. I also saw the number of delinquencies has risen tremendously, meaning people over 30 days late with their payments. Now, and also, again, much of this is not in the area of discretionary spending. It's in the area where people are having to use it because of prices being elevated, and furloughs and layoffs. People are using it for day-to-day living. And so, again, um, whatever you can do to avoid putting things on a credit card, if it's taking a second job, if it's saying, you know what, I'm not going to buy that item right now, or if you've got some savings, save for items. So you definitely want to avoid discretionary spending on the credit card. And I did my journey. I told you all, hey, what was affecting my bottom line and our budget and our households was eating out, and the Starbucks. I'm happy to say, to report to you, it's been over a month since eating out, and it's been over a month with Starbucks. So that's going to become more of a luxury, which is where it should be, and definitely don't want to be putting it on a credit card. So what are some things I looked online, what are some things that could be some recommendations when it comes to buying a house in this particular market? First thing we always do as believers, we start with prayer. We're seeking God's guidance, we're seeking his favor, we're seeking his principles when it comes to any purchases, for sure, big purchases. Then look at some creative financing options. So there's alternatives like the rent to own agreements, so that could lower the equity costs in housing. Do some uh, research on that. Adjust your expectations. So instead of buying, the biggest house, look for a smaller house in a really nice neighborhood. Uh, adjust your we said adjust your expectations, negotiate seller concessions, talk to the seller. I know when I sold my dad's property, um eh, who he went on to be with the Lord, there was a letter written by the borrower, potential borrower, that was the difference in us making the decision, me and my sister, to sell to that couple. And it wasn't the largest offer that we had, but those type of things you could look for when doing it. So it made a difference for us. Increase the savings and then boost your income. We talked about taking a second job, but don't use the second job to increase your standard of living. Use that to build up your reserves, build up maybe a bigger um, a down payment, paying down some debt with that job. Have a specific purpose for that. And then look at the first time buyer, home buyer programs. And doesn't mean necessarily you're a first time pure buyer. Some of the programs say if you haven't bought in 10 years, say you own your house for 10 years, research those different programs. And then, of course, if this is your very first time, look at those first time home buyer programs that are out there. A lot of times you can take classes that are like HUD approved, and they will match like some of the money that you put down to be a down payment. So look at those different areas that you can just get creative. And the way that creativity gets sparked is through praying to the Lord, meditating on his word, and listening to the Lord. Now let's go ahead and look at the earnings. So we went kind of a low last week in the earnings. Now it ramped back up as we come to the end. So we've got some big companies that are reporting. We got Home Depot that's reporting. We've got Target, TJ Maxx, Lowe's, Walmart, uh, and Ross for Less. And then I came coming back to the big one for me is NVIDIA. This is a lot of people are waiting for that. Palo Alto is also a good one for technology, but a lot of people are waiting, including me, because I've got some positions in NVIDIA to see this is going to give us a good measuring stick when it comes to artificial intelligence as well as just technology overall. And so let's look at the other end of that 50-year mortgage. Once again, this is not a recommendation. Do your own research. So let's say that 50-year mortgage product gets put on the market. It's a horrible product for the consumer using, in other words, I'm a home buyer and I can do a 50-year mortgage. But if you're an investor, I'm telling you, the banks are going to rack up on a 50-year mortgage. So if they do put that product out there and people rush to it, if I were you, I would look to invest in places like Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America. These are originators. Rocket Mortgage, Loan Depot, all these are publicly traded. Then you look at the home builders like D.R. Horton, Lennar, Pulte. Uh, I didn't know the head of the, I think it's the Federal Home Agency, FHA, yeah, is the Pulte grandson, if I'm not mistaken, is either great grandson or grandson. This guy is heir to the Pulte fortune. Didn't know that. He's in the administration. Toll Brothers. Then you got some REITs that are out there that you may consider. But I would say, again, as a consumer, it's a horrible idea of a 50-year mortgage. But if you're an investor, banks are going to rack up. You're locking someone in for a 50-year mortgage, and they're going to charge additional interest because there's more risk. So they're going to have that interest piled on top of it. Because if you're talking about taking a risk for somebody 50 years, who most likely is going to pass away. Let's say you're 30 years old, all right, that's taking you into your 80s before you pay that off. They're gonna, I don't know how much interest they're gonna put. Some have said they may double the amount of interest of the market on a 50-year mortgage. So what do? You invest in those type of companies. You don't you be the consumer, you become an investor. And the last thing is, before we go into just looking at the market overall, the market just kind of, just fell out of bed last week. I mean, it just went down and dipped. Possibly one of the things is it's not a foregone conclusion that the rate cut is going to happen. So the market didn't necessarily like that. So you can see now it's actually a greater percentage that it stays the same because the current target rate is between 375 400 basis points. It's a 55% chance it stays there, only a 44% that there's a cut in December. And that's what Chairman Powell was saying. Hey, it's not automatic. We're going to cut rates in December. So it looks like, and the market didn't respond to that, as you can see. Well, here's QQQ technology. I mean, still nice trend overall. I got to be not greedy here because it's been a nice trend. My portfolio went down, but I have to look at it, it's still way up for the year. But when you get those losses, you're like, but again, because as a believer, as the Lord, I need to make sure I'm focused on being content, right? Even when you're going through abundant periods, you're content. It's still an abundant period. There's QQQ. It went down. Some selling. We'll see what happens next week. And then follow here's SPY. Same thing. Not um, as a profound and the way QQQ dipped, but still dipped. But you might have heard a lot of people were going into the Dow, right? That's the Dow 30 stocks. It was up while QQQ was down, technology primarily, and SPY was not as bad. In some cases, it was up some days. So that's it for this week's stewardship video. Again, I mean, just going back to debt, being careful of debt, being wary of debt when all possible, any debt you have, paying it down. And if they offer a 50-year mortgage, run as a consumer, look at it as a possible investment. And we showed you those companies that you could consider. Once again, not a recommendation. So with that, that's this week's stewardship video. We'll see you next week. As my pastor always says, remember to keep a good spirit, have a yabba dabba do good time. And as we always say on the stewardship video, remember Jesus is Lord. Therefore, he's the owner, but we have the important role of following his principles and implementing that biblical stewardship in our lives. See you next week.